So it is really depending on the notified body and the country you're in. The notified body accepts certain languages. For example, TÜV Süd accepts documentation in English or in German. Okay. And everything we provide to them for review need to be in one of these languages. Even if the notified body, even if the specific reviewer would be capable to understand, for example, French, they are not allowed to review and conclude on. They need to have it available either in English or in German. So, I mean, this is an information we provide to the supplier. In general, our language is English. Worst case, translations need to be done in order to allow a notified body review.
Good. Another question from my side. Now, let's say I'm a Swiss supplier. I exist since many years. I believe my quality is great. I believe my my products and my processes fulfill pretty much what you want and what you showed on your slides. What do I do to become a supplier of Stryker? I believe a simple email to info@stryker.com might not suffice.
It's actually a good question. I mean, it's always good to advertise and to make somebody aware that you have a great product, that you have great products, and that you're a great company. But basically, within the product development, there is a different team, or there is a team of people who decides on the supplier selection, which is usually a combination of the development team, the manufacturing team, because they still do the umbrella, so to say, for the supplier, and the advanced operations, which doing the manufacturing transfer. Generally speaking, if you're a good supplier, we're probably aware, and you would be in a list. But again, I mean, promoting yourself, that's definitely something that could work too.
So it's a little bit, don't call me, I call you, but it's also make yourself visible.
Definitely. I mean, if you're doing a great job and you want to be a supplier, it's always also good to speak up and not wait that somebody's coming and selecting you.
Very good. Okay. Thank you very much, Monica. And I remind you that Monica is from Stryker, which we all think is a very old and established medtech company. And actually, in the year I was born, Stryker was already 25 years in business, which I find pretty remarkable. And it has been one of the absolutely well-performing medtech companies year after year. Now, there are, however, companies that are even much older than Stryker, and that gives me the good intro to our next speaker, Raphael Laubscher, who comes to us from Laubscher Präzision AG. Most of you will probably know that the Swiss Federation, in the way we know it today, was established in 1848. I'm not going to drag through all the history back to 1291, but 1848. And at that time, the company Laubscher already existed since 2 years, which is phenomenal. So founded in 1846, has 260 people working there, mostly for turned and machined goods. And we have the honor to have the CEO, Raphael Laubscher, who entered this business 17 years ago in 2003, and is the CEO in the 6th generation since 2016. So a lot on the shoulders. So he's 6 generations CEO. Raphael studied business administration at the University of St. Gallen, comes with a doctor in economics and industrial engineering in Hamburg. He has broad consulting and management experience and worked for BDO, FERAC, SV Group, and various startup companies. And in addition of what he's running in his day job at Laubscher, he is also a member of the board of Swiss Medtech. Raphael, welcome to the breakout session. We're looking forward to your talk.
Thank you very much, Heiko, for the introduction. I will not speak a lot about our history, and I will not so much talk today about delivery time, the quality of our products, and the price. I will come back on the business issue later on, but the main topic will be the MDR and the consequences. I don't know how. I guess my slides are not yet on the on the, or are not yet visible. Is it my part to do it, or? Yeah, okay. You can hear me, Heiko? Okay, so
I hear you, but we don't see your slides. You have to.
Okay, I'll go through with
screen share.
I do it without
screen share, and then you should see the slides. At the bottom of the window, there's a button called screen share, and that should allow you to change your slides.
Okay. No, I can't find it anyhow. So I try to talk about, or I like to talk about supplier management, process safe manufacturing, and the accompanying documents a little bit more in detail in a moment. There are three other aspects which are also relevant for a supplier. That first, it's the risk management, which became more important with the new MDR. It was already becoming more important with the new version of the ISO medtech norm in 2016, but it will have an additional weight now with the new MDR. Then the traceability for a company like ours that has been certified for over 30 years and also has the medtech standard, the ISO medtech standard over 10 years. The traceability itself, it's not really a new issue and a big challenge, but however, in the practice to show or the traceability can be very demanding. If you produce millions of parts on different machines for one client and you get a complaint which lies back a couple of years or which considers a production which lies back a couple of years back, it really means that you have to be well organized and have a clear system, because otherwise you can't answer the questions on which machine, under which circumstances the product you delivered was produced. So it's really that practical aspect which is important. Then a third aspect is the operating materials and substances that can be forbidden or that are regulated with the MDR, like substances for which have carcinogenic substance or influence the reproduction or whatever. And this means that certain material or auxiliary materials you use are no longer allowed, and that can have a great impact on the way your production is run. And in the limit, it means that even a small change in the composition of a steel alloy can influence the way you produce a part very sufficiently, and at the limit you have to almost stop the production. Then now I come back to my the three main aspects which I feel that the MDR influenced the way we function as a supplier. And the first one is how we treat our supplier management on our own, because with the new MDR, the focus really lies on the entire supply chain. And that means that we have to treat our own supplier more strict and in a more transparent and clear way. And finally, that means that we also have to make quality assurance agreements with our suppliers. That means there is a written agreement about the quality. There is clearness about transparency, which documents have to be delivered. It has to be made also clear that also our supplier can be audited by our client or even by the notified body, what already Monica Okorios mentioned. And yeah, in this way, the whole supply chain became more transparent and really the focus become on the whole thing. And it means also that we have to monitor and evaluate our subcontractors more seriously and more consequently. We did it in the past. So here I really see quite a big issue, because as a small and medium-sized company which works together with even smaller companies, often as suppliers, they are not really used to these kind of contracts and the way we worked together over a couple of years. So that means sometimes that we have relationship with last for 60 or 70 years, and now because we are becoming more, we go more in the medical, that means that after a long period of trust and spoken words and oral agreements, you have to start with paperwork, and you have to really convince them and persuade why that is help or needed. Another aspect also Monica Corias already talked about is the pro-safe manufacturing. And I think it's clear that when you demand a medical product and as a client you use a medical device, you want that this one function at 100%. And that means that the zero defect target is very understandable. On the other hand, as a company which produces millions of parts and works really in the big series, you know that technically a zero defect is not really feasible, and that means that you have to find ways how you can control and test your production and your products, that finally you can deliver zero defect part. And that's often a balancing act between this zero defect part and the costs all this testing and control effort brings to you. And that leads finally to the third point, the accompanying documents, and there it's quite similar. I think it's understandable that some documentation is needed, but when we see what goes on today, when we have a new product and have to produce a sample series, and we see finally that with a couple of parts, we send 50 to 80 pages along with that to our customer. It becomes really a business issue, how we produce these documents, because finally our main competence is to manufacturing parts and not to handle and produce documents. And for a mid-size or a small or medium-sized company, it's really a business or an economic aspect if you how to handle that. And that's also when I summarize and see the challenges and the opportunity, I think the higher transparency and the documentation requirements which goes along with the new MDR are considered in relation with the patient safety understandable. Also the zero defect target is understandable. And I think also the focus on the entire supply chain is much understandable. I see two critical points. The one is this aspect with the zero defect point, because that leads really to enormous cost to guarantee that, especially in big series. And I can't see for every part or for every for every product we produce already a clear solution. And the second thing is also with all this standardization and formalization, which are demanded with the new MDR, I'm not sure if that always leads to better quality and guarantees better qualities, because on the other hand, the self or the personal responsibility of an employee is also important to get the quality you needed. And with all the regulation and the controls and the strictness of the procedure, I see there a contradiction, and I don't know if we always put new regulation and put more strictness in these things, if that really leads to more quality. That's a question I still have. We will see what the future brings, but I feel for a supplier which works already under the ISO 30, also ISO MedTech norm. The new MDR doesn't bring much new things. It's the consequences and maybe the volume of how things are treated, which are different. But yeah, that's the conclusion. Thank you. And sorry that slides didn't work.
No problem, no problem. You did very well on the audio line, Raphael. Thank you very much. There were some questions popping up. One resolved around the CMR substances, and that's another beautiful abbreviation. So again, in the secret quality language, I decode for you. So CMR, Raphael had mentioned it in his talk: carcinogenic, mutagenic, or toxic to reproduction. So bad stuff, basically. Mm-hmm. And the question was to Monica and to Raphael, with your sub-suppliers, how do you deal with that? And Monica already shared that basically they rely on certificates from raw material suppliers, and that's basically it. Is that similar for Laubscher?
That's similar, that we demand the specific paper from our supplier. But the problem on our side is really in the manufacturing process, because that if you take away a substance of a liquid for the machines, for example, or a substance out of an alloy, that really has big impact on the manufacturing, and that's the way it becomes difficult. Because, for example, now you have the bleifrei, I don't know, unleaded material. Is something which that's not very typical in the medtech industry, but it shows how it functions. The material is much more expensive, and it's harder to manufacture. The tooling costs are going up, the cycle time is bigger, and finally the costs are at least double, if not 3 or 4 times higher than before. And so far we see a big contradiction between the needs from the regulation side and the will customers have to pay 3 or 4 times higher prices for the same product.
Yeah, so that's the usual conflict with the price, the time, the quality, etc. The magic triangle, I guess, right? So, but maybe reflecting back a few years, Raphael, how did the relation or the way of working with the big medtech suppliers, did that change since you're in the company, which is now 17 years? Was it easier in the old days? Have your customers become stricter? Are they willing to also participate in the additional cost that they imply in your company by insisting on things like the zero defect policy, etc.?
So on the one side, you can say it's still the same. You will finally talk about time, quality, and price. That remains the same. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, the way, especially on the quality side, the definition of processes, the transparencies, and the documentation on the process side, you can't compare today with 20 years ago. That's something completely new. We never talked about validation. We had never to ask a customer if we can change something, and these things are new. So that means that what Monica Corias mentioned, the communication between the customer and the supplier is very important. Without communication, you can't deliver good quality, and that means finally also you will have problem with time and price.
Maybe a related question from my side to the communication. I speak quite a bit to these large strategics, is that Medtronic, Stryker, J&J, what have you. And in terms of communication, my biggest worry is to find the right person I need to talk to. Is that for you always super clear who it is you need to talk to?
For me as a supplier?
Yeah. You call Monica?
It depends. Sometimes it's clear, sometimes it's not. Okay.
Monica, do you communicate to your suppliers who to talk about what? Is there some sort of a Stryker phone list, or how does that work?
So usually it should be clear from the point in time when we draw up the quality agreements. I mean, if there would be an uncertainty, there should be one point of contact who could help you out. So of course, there might be cases where it's difficult, but it should not be the general rule.
And for us, it's not so much that it's not clear with whom you are talking, but that you get different expectation and wishes. Because, for example, we know that if we talk about quality, it's the quality department of the customer, and on the other side, if we talk about price and delivery, it's the supplier side. And sometimes you have the issue that the supplier wants the new parts, and you don't get the permission of the quality department to produce the parts on the machine because the validation is not yet done, because you are waiting on a certain paper from whoever, and that there you come sometimes in difficult conflicts, and that's for me more difficult than to find the right person at the client side.
Yeah. All right. So we'll move on to the third presentation in this breakout session, third and last presentation. We are joined by Barbara Polek from SFL, also located in Basel. She's the head of supply chain, and obviously a lot of the things we now discussed have to do with supply chain. She supports clients in setting up distribution solution, stakeholder selection and qualification, product identification, master data management, and further tasks. Barbara joined SFL in 2018, and before that held line and project management positions in different areas of clinical and commercial supply chain management, both in a large international pharma company, I think it was Roche for 21 years, if I'm well informed, and in small biotech companies. Barbara holds a master's degree in economics from the University of Basel, as well as a master in international pharmaconomics and health economics from Cardiff, UK. Barbara, nice to have you in the breakout session. We're looking forward to your presentation.
And I thank you very much for inviting me to this audience. It's a pleasure to be able to speaking to you, and you will see that a lot that I'm going to present builds on what Monica and Raphael have already illustrated from a more practical point of view. I just release my screen. Is it visible?
Perfect.
Okay. So how to really do it, how to really become a preferred supplier for a legal manufacturer, and how to remain a preferred supplier. That is the topic of my presentation. And I allow myself to briefly introduce SFL before I dig into more details. SFL is a consultancy providing integrated solutions from development to the market, to the medtech and pharmaceutical industries. We have a multidisciplinary team which covers areas like regulatory affairs, quality and supply chain, but also medical affairs, pharmacovigilance and compliance, market access, public affairs, and of course the combination of all of them. For the purpose of this presentation, I assume we all understand a supplier to be a person that performs manufacturing activities or provides specified services to another person or on behalf of another person. With manufacturing activities, we can think of raw materials, components, software, accessories, finished medical devices, system and procedure packs, you name it. In order to become and remain a preferred supplier, actually as a control cycle of activities is applied, starting with evaluation of candidates for a new supplier, a process which should be risk-based with evaluation techniques commensurate to the risk level of the supplier and the product that is going to be selected. The outcome of the evaluation stage, of course, informs the selection decision. And as Monica also clearly pointed out, preferred suppliers would have an agreement, supply agreement, quality agreement of both of them with the legal manufacturer, and the selection phase would be completed by really accepting the selected supplier as preferred supplier, and this is often documented in the approved suppliers list, or however you name this the documentation of who is your preferred supplier. And this is not the end of the story, obviously. That is the beginning of collaboration, the quality of which is going to be regularly and closely monitored. For this purpose, you define and mutually agree key performance indicators, and Monica has provided a nice list of examples. And these would be reviewed on a regular basis. Usually you will have business review meetings from, on a quarterly or biannual basis, or whatever you choose. And the values of these KPIs will hint at areas of unsatisfactory performance, which need to be addressed by improvement measures. And obviously this process can start or is repeated from time to time. I'm going to say a few more words about some aspects of this control cycle and start with the risk identification. We are talking about risks pertaining to the safety or performance requirements of the medical device and the compliance of the supplier with regulatory requirements. Product-related risks are determined by the risk class of the device, which indicates the criticality of not only the product, but also the manufacturing and control procedures, and it informs the required scope of the supplier's quality management system. Supplier-related risks are concerning the certification. We have heard examples of that. It's financials, the capacity, performance, and if you are a single source supplier, you will understand that the manufacturer will apply particular scrutiny to ensure continued operation of this supplier. The risk-based supplier evaluation and selection should apply methods that, as I said before, that are commensurate to the level of risk of the supplier and product. For higher risk products and suppliers, the legal manufacturer will probably want to rely on an on-site audit, and certainly not just on the review of credentials. And agreements, quality agreements, supply agreements will be put in place in writing, which also include the purchasing information. And the lower the risk level, the more flexible and maybe the less stringent measures are applied to evaluate the supplier and to also treat the contracting phase. This is just an illustration, of course. It's not an advice exactly how it has to, which methods have to be chosen in a particular situation. And it was mentioned before as well that a supplier will have to accept that it would also be audited or inspected by the manufacturer's notified body or inspectorate. These audits and inspections may be announced or unannounced, and certainly will not replace or reduce the manufacturer's evaluation and control measures, but complement them. We are coming to the quality agreement, which indeed is a very important tool to define and mutually agree each party's responsibilities under the collaboration. The list of items that you see on the screen is by no means exhaustive and will have to, of course, be reflective of the type of collaboration that you envisage. But certainly both parties will have to commit to comply with applicable regulatory requirements. As I said before, the supplier will have to accept audits not only by the manufacturer, but also by the manufacturer's notified body and inspectorate. Then purchasing information elements may have to be detailed, like purchasing, manufacturing and testing specifications and controls, qualification and validation of equipment, manufacturing and testing processes. Change control is very important, and as Raphael mentioned, it seems to be a new concept in some cases, that the supplier has to notify the manufacturer well in advance to let him know about his plans to make changes, and the manufacturer would have to agree explicitly with these changes. Also, the handling of complaints and non-conformities will have to be agreed, how the information exchange and the collaboration and in the investigation and activities to remedy any issues have to be handled. The CAPA process, corrective action and preventive action, is applied, among others, to remedy deficiencies in the performance, or of course any quality defects or service defects. The documentation will be addressed in the quality agreement, assigning responsibility for the generation of documents, storage duration, and also the mutual access to certain documents will be addressed in the quality agreement. Coming to the monitoring and continuous improvement, this is a control process of its own, actually, and usually starts with the KPI definition and mutual agreement, their regular measurement and analysis, and discussion in business review meetings, which also will address necessity to make improvements where KPI values are not living up to the targets. Very important to say is that KPIs need to be measurable to be able to serve as objective evidence. Hence, relying on email exchanges saying, job well done, or I'm not happy with your constant late deliveries, will certainly not do the job. To summarize, what may have become evident from my little presentation, a preferred supplier commits to a partnership with the manufacturer, and actually vice versa too. The supplier is accepting a structured evaluation and re-evaluation process at regularly predefined cadences. The supplier will accept inspections and audits by the manufacturer's inspectorate and the notified body. Both parties will commit to agreed terms of collaboration and also to a continuous performance improvement process. And with this, I have come to the end of my presentation, and thank you very much for your attention.
Great. Thank you very much, Barbara. That was a very clear statement underlining the necessity of having clear agreements with also a good list of aspects to look into. And I like it also that you stated it's a two-way street. So both the customer and the supplier need to agree. Question from Andreas. and I see you're typing faster than I can read. So Andreas, would you recommend to define a PRRC also for suppliers? Monica, you want to comment on that as you're typing already anyways?
Yeah, the PRC is only a requirement for the legal manufacturer, and if the supplier is not acting as a legal manufacturer, I personally would not recommend it because it's additional burden, which will not help at the end, from my perspective.
Oh, good. And from the experience, probably again to you, Monica, where do you see the most gaps in a supplier's QMS regarding MDR, or maybe also Raphael can chime into that?
I can start with my comment. So from my perspective, state-of-the-art validations. Validation is a hot topic for sterile packaging, for cleaning, sterilization. And even if PFMEA is a very old topic, so to say, there are still challenges seen. And as it was mentioned before, I mean, the MDR itself doesn't pose new requirements for suppliers. Everything we request was also before mandatory. It just gets now more attention and is more visible.
Would you agree to that, Raphael? Or Barbara? You first have to unmute. You have to unmute first, Raphael.
Sorry, not so used to it, working in a small company. No, sorry, I agree though. Validation is certainly a big issue. And the other thing is what I already mentioned. For us to treat our supplier in line with the MDR is an issue.
Barbara, any comments from your side?
Well, I have to say I'm maybe a bit biased from, you have seen it from the introduction. Coming from the pharmaceutical industry, a lot which is discussed here, of course, has been established for many, many years there. So we are, pharma industry is a bit less frightened about the documentation because they have been living with it for a long time. And of course, it is, there is a balance between the effort that it takes to comply with these requirements. But I think we should take a positive view to the benefits that it provides as well. And also Monica has made it clear in her presentation, having the transparency, having clarity about who does what and who takes which responsibility is certainly very important. And the traceability, which Raphael alluded to, the traceability, of course, can only be helped with a clear documentation, for instance, of the supply chains, but also of manufacturing processes and supplier relationships. This can only be of benefit in a more international, more global world with manufacturers and suppliers that may not have had the luxury of working together on a trust basis for many years. In these cases, documentation, the quality management system, the quality agreements are absolutely vital.
I mean, I wanna drill a little bit on your experience in pharma, and we talk about this often, that pharma has been a few years ahead in implementing more standards than medtech, and medtech has been the Wild West, etc., etc. Given that you have now both perspectives, what do you think? Can medtech learn from pharma?
I hesitate to say yes, because you never like to learn from other people, particularly if it is about what you may perceive as a burden, as a more effort into paperwork, etc. So let me not comment on this okay. learning exercise. But as I said before, I think it helps to take a positive attitude to these regulations and to the documentation requirements. They can help a lot, and particularly in as I said before, in a more global environment with lots of supplier relationships. and also lots of customer relationships across different geographies, different regulations. There is a need to be clear about how you do things, how you trade, how you communicate, how you manage your procedures. Unfortunately, the trust-based time has been very good, and continues to be very good, but it will not be able to accommodate the challenges of a globalized world.
Great. Well, this was also a good closing statement from Barbara. I thank the three speakers. It's now 11:03, so in 2 minutes we will go back to the main session. Again, there's probably going to be a pop-up on your screen, which you have to accept. So I will see you again in 2 minutes back in the plenary session number 2. Thank you all the participants, and particularly our three speakers who brought various aspects and various perspectives, all revolving around how can we regulate in a good way this relation between suppliers and their customers. Thank you very much, and see you in the plenary session.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.